So my name's Christina. I'm currently a graduate student in school psychology, but my role within the school district, I was a behavioral intervention assistant. So it's kind of similar to a classroom aide, but more behavior experience.
Hmm.
I'm Victoria Williams. I am a BCBA within the school district, and I oversee and support Christina's role as well as the classroom and support the behavioral portions of the IEP for a social, emotional, and behavioral program, as well as supporting other students with um, additional behavioral challenges within the school district.
So, Victoria, what made you want to be a BCBA? What inspired you to be that?
I've always worked with children. I mean, even like as, in high school and middle school, I babysat and always just was drawn to children. And then I was in school to be a speech pathologist and I needed a part-time job.
Hmm.
And I got this crazy job as a I'm trying to think, we were called behavior technicians and ABA was new. And this was in 2009 and I had never heard of it. And I started and I never left.
So you've been a BCBA since 2009?
2009 is when I started as like a technician,
Okay.
which is like working one-on-one with the students. And then I've been a BCBA since 2015.
Okay. Okay. And Christina, how'd you get into the same field?
Um, I started out as a classroom aide for subbing. That was in a previous school district, and it was there where I got to work one-on-one with a student who was qualified under emotional disturbance. And at the time, I had no idea what it was. I was
Hmm.
just told, like, hey, you got to work with this student. Um, she was in the hallways and screaming, and they had her in separate classrooms just by herself. She was in the process of going to an NPS, and it was there where I was kind of like, I don't know what emotional disturbance is. I got to kind of figure it out. So I
Yeah.
was on YouTube and Google and just trying to figure that all out. And it was really in that moment I remember she tore down the classroom. I mean, she threw huge bookshelves down. And she said, I don't get why I can't learn like everybody else.
Hmm.
And it struck me because I said those same things to my parents growing up. Um, it's just something you feel. It's just something different. You're not like everybody else, and not in the capacity that I was with her, but I got it.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, you know what? Let's figure it out. We'll cover all the math numbers up and just look at this one. And so we kind of just left the room as it was, and we just worked on that math sheet at the time. So I moved away from home, and I wanted to work closer to home. So that's when I got into my current school district. I did classroom aide there, mod severe, and that student I worked with was labeled as physically aggressive. Would pull your hair, bite, scratch without even you could just be sitting there. And I I noticed he was just different from what people were saying. It wasn't that he was physically aggressive, but you can see there was something different. And with him, I
Hmm.
felt he had physical pain. He was nonverbal. And so, I started to see the patterns of these behaviors, and working with that student was where I got to see um, Tori and other supervisors and how they work. And so they probably thought I was so annoying at the time. I was constantly asking questions. I'm like, I think it's this, and this is the pattern, and I tried this and it worked.
Yeah.
And that's when I found out about the social emotional program, and I thought I gotta try it.
Yeah.
Can you give me a chance? And that's
Okay.
how I ended up there.
Yeah. And the social emotional program, can you explain a little bit about the program? Like what exactly do you guys do?
So the program is a K through third program, and it was actually modeled after a preschool autism program, and it was a 10-week intensive intervention for behavioral challenges.
Hmm.
And the irony in that, and that we've learned, is that students with significant social emotional challenges, 10 weeks is, or to put a timeline or a cap or any sort of um, number of weeks that you're gonna see results in behavior change was just not possible.
Yeah.
And um, and so it was intended to be a short-term program, early intervention, K through third. And so it was intended to be a short-term intervention. And what we learned is that there was some students that weren't even ready to, or they didn't even have connections or relationships by the 10-week period.
Yeah.
So the whole premise of the program is it's embedded. So it has a counselor, a BCBA. Now it has two behavior intervention assistants, which sort of function as collaborative aids. They do provide some academic support, but their main goal is to support behaviors so that the classroom teacher can teach. And then there's a counselor, I said, and then there's embedded OT and speech that are part of the program. And essentially what we have learned over time is that the duration and time in which students with significant social emotional challenges need is a lot longer than a 10-week program.
Oh yeah.
And so it's really specific on the student, but also, when you look at when is a good time to transition students who struggle with transitions, we're looking at more like natural periods of time that would be appropriate to them to then transition back. And the goal is that they always transition back to their home school. But given that, there's also been a lot of challenges, or they have a lot of even like small minor traumas with their previous school site. They didn't have positive experiences with their previous school sites. The staff didn't have positive experiences with these students. And so that's not always the right route either, or the most beneficial route to the students. And so now we're looking at that is the goal. We want them to be able to go back to their home school. But that may not always be the end goal.
So, okay, so this program, how many students do you serve in the program?
It's up to 10. I would say on average, 5 is really what we're looking. That's what's transpired over time, is looking at about 5 students with 3 staff ratio on a daily basis. The BCBA and the counselor are not permanent staff there, but they are present. The BCBA is present more so than the counselor, and then the counselor is present, a couple days a week.
So if I'm the administrator leading the IEP at elementary school, and I'm like, okay, I want to offer this program is at this school, I want to offer to you guys. I offer to the parents, they accept it, and then the student goes from my home school, this is the home school, to your program, is there for a period of time. You said it's a K through 3, so they're not going to go past 3rd grade. And so that's kind of how it goes, right? It has to be offered through the IEP, correct?
Through the IEP. So it is a special ed program. It is taught by a mild to moderate teacher. And so most of the students in our program are academically at grade level, or cognitively are scoring at grade level, but maybe have some academic deficits due to their behavior, or loss of learning due to behavior, or loss of learning due to various different factors. Sometimes it's home life, sometimes it's different trauma events that have occurred, but most of our students are not coming in with a significant academic deficit.
Okay, and they're on the general ed curriculum, correct? I'm figuring.
Yeah, so yeah, they're taught by a mild to moderate teacher, so it's scaffolded, it's put to their level, but yes, they are on grade level curriculum.
Okay, they're not on the alternative curriculum. They're on the gen ed curriculum.
They're on a diploma track.
There you go. Okay,
Yes.
okay. So I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. I'm seeing like, okay, 10 students. Oh, so then, okay, so they're on grade level. They have they're all really close to grade level, and they have behavior problems. And so you guys take them in, and you offer speech, and you offer all these services and counseling, and what are the parents saying about this? How is the success rate with students that you serve? What do you
So,
even see?
one of the biggest things that I think we all struggle with some of our students with significant behavior challenges is how to incorporate parents, right?
Mm,
There tends to be, um, some challenges in that area, and whether that stems from um, parents, who are not particularly involved in their students, or is it a manifestation of so much unsuccessful interactions with the educational system that they're kind of, for lack of a better word, checked out or not
yeah.
engaged?
Hmm.
And so it does take a period of trust. Like, there is a good chunk of time where I think parents adjust to trusting the educational system again. They're The goal is to be contacted um, positively as much as correctively.
Yeah.
Um, and what we can see is there is a shift. There is a shift once that happens, once they see that their student is coming home and saying, I like school, I have friends, or I'm doing well. Um, and then, as
Mm,
well as just trust in the staff who are there, they're not, every phone call isn't intended for punitive measures.
yeah.
Um, but we also know that without parents, honestly, and we've seen it time after time, without that piece, it doesn't yield the same results.
Hmm.
And so
No.
we do have a threshold of, we understand that they are part of a behavioral program. We understand that they're going to have behaviors here. And we understand that there is going to be a different threshold for what we manage and work through in a given day than maybe in a comprehensive campus who are being, in a gen ed classroom, something like that. But we also have learned that if we create an environment where we will manage any and all behaviors for an extended period of time, then that ends up what we become for the students. And
Mm,
it ends up inadvertently reinforcing the parents, because now there's no communication regarding those behaviors. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So are these students in a special day class, or are they mainstreamed the majority of the time?
So the goal is mainstream. That's sort of like that's the goal. The
Hmm.
goal is that these students will be, in a special day class. Um, that's in the beginning. And then as they demonstrate a level of success, and we have some uh, data programming that we use, that we've come up with, to kind of measure that success. And then the goal is that they mainstream to C. Um, that's been an interesting thing, because the mainstreaming is done on a different campus than, like, let's say that they will return to. Okay.
Hmm.
And so we really struggle, and I think it's where we're at in our program, is it beneficial for what we have determined over time is mainstreaming is the data point that shows if kids are ready to go back or whatever.
Hmm.
But for these types of students, is it beneficial to be a fish out of the water in the middle of the school year, to be put into a classroom that they're not going to be put in if they do go back?
Yeah.
Um, and so that's what we toy with. But that was the original plan. The original plan was that mainstreaming was going to be a part of um, the process to know if a student was truly ready and that their behavior would be transferable and generalized.
So the general ed teachers on your campus, do they have a high threshold for behavior as well? Because they know that you're on campus, and they know that these students are being mainstreamed to them, and they know the whole process and what your goal is, and so they're like, okay, I feel like we have to, deal with behavior a little bit more. We're gonna, we have a higher threshold for some of these type of behaviors because we know that these students are going to come to our class. We know what they're bringing, and we know we have support as well here on this campus. And do they have a higher threshold when it comes to dealing with behavior?
I'll let Christina answer that one, because as the behavior assistant, she on that campus, she gets called for a lot of different various.
In regards to our students, when it goes to mainstreaming, the program is what it is. It's a behavioral program for at times intensive behaviors. Teachers are aware of that. So when you have our students now going into their classroom, they are a bit hesitant.
Yeah.
Is this student going to have behaviors? Are they going to have trouble with me or other students? And they may sit them in the back. Some teachers are more accepting, dependent on the students. And I think with our students, it takes them to see they're just another kid. And they can write the paper and they can go to recess and they do everything that these other students do, but they're so blinded by these behaviors that are shown. They're not accepting at first. And I think that was a big thing this year was you had teachers come up and they're like, oh wow, he plays soccer. Like, yes, and he plays baseball too, and he loves it.
Yeah.
Or they say like, oh, he's so polite. Like, no, he's
Yeah.
very polite. You got to give him a chance. And so to see these teachers kind of open up this past year and accept these students and be proud of them and run up to us and say like, so and so had a great day today, or so and so did so good on the group work. Like, it's just kind of like a yes moment. In regards to campus wide, we are a bit more accessible, being that we are on the campus. In my position, we're there all the time, so we don't get called out like when the student is kind of having a rough time. We get called out when the class is evacuated, punches have been thrown, things are destroyed. So now we're coming in like, okay, what are we getting ourselves into? And I think it's very important in our role to be extremely professional and be calm and understand that this is another student who's just like everybody else. So when we're going into these rooms and everything's trashed, we're not running in there and yelling at this kid, but I've come into rooms and been like, hey, what's up? And fist bump the student, and they're kind of like, I had one kid, he's like, are you security? And I'm like, I got a picture of a dog on my shirt. I'm not security. So we do get called out in some pretty tough moments, and I think that's kind of where you can either make it or break it with these kids. You can show that I'm not upset and I'm not here to punish you, but I'm here to help you walk through this moment and get you back to class.
Is there some intake process when the kids come to this program? Like, do they meet everybody? Like, here's Christina, here's Victoria, here's the counselor, here's this. Do they meet everybody? Is there like some sort of process so that they're aware of kind of what's going on, or?
Yeah, so we do like a site visit, have parents and students come. Most of the parents and the students take us up on that. It can be a very I think overwhelming experience for the student. So they're coming in and it's interesting. Our current students tend to have like a little bit of a territorial response to new students kind of coming in. And so we've seen that. So we try to be mindful of timing and time of day. But yeah, that's the goal. The goal is, and it's interesting. We have our own entrance to our program, and we used to use it pretty freely. And what we realized is that was not in the best interest of anyone, that there is still such value, even from a parental standpoint, of walking through an office, seeing an admin, seeing secretaries, understanding that this expectation is the same. Doing that has changed tardiness. It has changed attendance, because when we kind of would do the side door approach, it felt like a drop off. It just felt like an easy drop off. So that is one thing that we shifted and changed, is as part of their introduction, we include the campus, because even our students still know and still have even though they may not always show respect or show the same level of response that maybe other students do to administration, they still know what that means, you know?
Yeah, yeah. That, I mean, I'm looking from the kids' point of view, and it's like, okay, I'm in, let's say, second grade, first grade, and I get pulled from my friends, and I'm in my school, and these are my friends, and I get pulled to a place where I have to take a bus, and I don't know the bus driver, I don't know the kids on the bus, and I get put in this new school, this new environment where I don't really know anybody, and that's a difficult situation. And then I could see that it could be hard at the very beginning when the kids enter the school, and I could see that it's difficult. Um, how is the admin support? Like, because you had mentioned fights in the classroom and stuff like that. Whenever there's a fight in the classroom, in my mind, that should be admin dealing with that. Like, admin should go there and deal with the fight, not the whomever. It should be admin, and whoever's going to write the report. If there needs a report to be written, it should be admin. How much does admin support the program?
So I think it's evolved over time, and I think we have had some really positive experiences with admin in the last couple of years. Um, we've kind of come up with a system in the sense of if it exceeds a certain amount of time, if staff are getting hurt, if other students are getting hurt, that's kind of the threshold to include them.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's some, we understand that there's going to be a level of like some physical aggression, or there's going to be some non-compliance or challenges with different things. But I think really when it hits that threshold that someone has the potential to get hurt, that's when we include admin. Now, I will say that I think with this population, there's not always, because it's all about relationship and rapport
Mm-hmm.
with this group. And if you don't have it, it doesn't matter what your title is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was a shift for some of the admin. And it's not just the students within this program, it's across campuses for students who are similar to the kids that we service. There is an assumption that because have a level of authority that students respond. And I think without relationship and rapport, it doesn't matter. And so I think that was a shift. That was a really big shift in understanding that they too have to have some level of relationship and rapport not associated with behaviors.
Absolutely. I feel like me being an admin, and if I had a program in the school and these students were students with difficult behavior who needed support, who feel like, they don't maybe they have low self-esteem. I'm in there all the time. I'm in that classroom all the time. I'm checking in with these kids all the time because I know that most of the behavior is going to probably come from right here. And so let me just build that rapport, like you were saying. Let me establish that relationship. Let me make the student feel like they're cared for, they're loved, and that they're taken care of, so that we don't have these outbursts. And if we do have an outburst because of the rapport, as an admin, I could be like, "Hey, come here. Let me talk to you for a second." Like Christina was saying, "Come here, come here. You all right? Let me give you a fist. Is everything okay?" That sort of connection is so huge, and hopefully
And
admin
so
will
is
do
the
that.
phone call home. Like, that's the thing, is that it doesn't always yield those results. But it is one thing to hear from me, who have always, sort of been a proponent for the student, who has always looked at behavior from a different angle or a different lens. And parents have known that, it is very different to get that phone call from me than to get that phone call from admin in saying, hey, this has reached a threshold that is beyond what's appropriate in this program.
Yeah,
That's also can be very powerful and impactful.
yeah. So you had mentioned rapport and building relationships. How when it comes to teacher buy-in, how is teacher buy-in with building those type of relationships, that type of rapport with these type of students? Whoever wants to
What?
answer. Christina, if you want to answer. Christina, you're in the classroom.
Um, I think, behavior is a difficult thing for teachers to kind of grasp. It's a lot of times it's your student, you're in the classroom, this is how you are in the classroom. Um, and even going back to admin, I think this trauma informed or trauma responsive type of education is kind of slowly making its way. And even though we're constantly educating ourselves in it, that doesn't mean everybody else is around us. And so, as simple as it is for us to say, like, oh, relationships and rapport, simple. You can do anything with that. Not everyone is there quite yet. And so I think it just takes a lot of examples, a lot of showing, and you can only say so much. And I think there are times where it can get a little difficult, and then they're kind of like, oh, I see why you said what you said, or I see why you did it this way instead of that way. You can't just get the worksheet done. You do have to maybe play with Play-Doh for 10 minutes and have a conversation and then do the worksheet. Um, so teacher buy-in it gets there, and it takes time, and it takes, just like you're working with the students, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of compassion, a lot of understanding. Just because I am aware of how to do some trauma responsive interventions doesn't mean that the teacher is going to be as quick to know either. So on my end, I need to understand it's going to take them some time. And I have to be the one to show them and say, hey, I will walk through it with you and I will show you how. Like, I just need to know you're in it. And I think that's what it really takes, is to know, like, are you going to have your heart in this? Because these kids are going to know if you don't.
Absolutely. I feel like if you get in the field of education, then you understand that everybody you work with, every kid you work with is going to come with some sort of trauma. I feel like you should know this. You should know that nobody's going to come into the school where they had a perfect family and home environment. Everything was perfect for them. And they just walk into this classroom, just going to follow rules. That doesn't even make sense as like as an adolescent, as growing up, you're going to test boundaries and push buttons. And I feel like, you know, educators and, we should know this. We should know this. And then I feel like some of the strategies are just simple things like loving the kid, like showing
Yeah,
love, like this is not
yeah.
even hard stuff. I feel like you didn't have to take a trauma informed course. You don't know that you don't need to know their ACE score or whatever. I feel like just in general, you have teachers have kids. You love your children, and they respond a certain way. I feel like it's the same thing where love these kids, support these kids, boost up their self-esteem, simple things like that, and you're going to be good. And I don't know why in some cases people don't understand that.
You know,
It
I
and
you
oh, go
oh,
ahead,
I
Trey.
was just gonna say there's been a lot of turnover in a program like this, and that's the number one thing we hear is like, these kids had not had a stable teacher um prior to this year. They had like long-term subs that have been successful at times, but
Yeah,
this was the first year since 2020 that we've had stability in the classroom.
it's important.
And I used to think that you could create a bunch of systems, right? Because that's what I had learned dealing with more of my autism population. I'll just create another reinforcement system, or I'll create another token system, or I'll just, let me look at the reinforcers. Let me look. And what I realized is that none of that mattered without a connection.
Mhm.
And actually our teacher this year kind of taught me that more than anything. And I think that there's reinforcers that are valuable, right? Because at the end of the day, like, a tangible representation of positive, good work does support some of our students, and it does maintain some of that behavior. But it is not, you cannot throw reinforcement at a teaching deficit, at a curriculum deficit, or at a relationship deficit. And those are the major things that I have learned this year, to scale back on all of that, because it doesn't make this particular population change their behavior without those things.
Yes, I feel like students with difficult behavior follow people before they follow any rules.
100%.
They're gonna follow people. They're gonna follow people, and they read people, and they understand. Okay, this person cares for me. This person doesn't, and they get it, and they can sense it. And the minute they sense that this person doesn't care for me, well, they're not gonna follow any directions. They're just not. And um, you got to win them over. You got to win them over. And the first way I feel like you win them over is just by keeping them safe. If you could keep a safe environment, you keep them safe. You have rules, structure, procedures. Keep them safe. That's the most simplest thing. You don't have to have a good personality. You don't have to be the funniest person. If you just keep them safe, you're on the right track. I feel
Yeah.
that's just the bottom line. And then you're sending the message of love because you always love the things you keep safe. You always love the things you keep safe. And so if you're that kid in that classroom, you're like, oh, Miss is always keeping me safe. Miss is always looking out for me. She's asking me if I want an extra muffin for breakfast. She's asking me if I'm thirsty. She's keeping a safe environment. Nobody's harming me. I feel comfortable in this classroom. I feel cared for in this classroom. That's like the magic bullet. That's really all you have to do. If you do those things, in my opinion, you're gonna win. You're going to win. And I don't know if everybody does that or if everybody understands that. But I feel like that's where it's at.
I don't think it's everyone may not understand it. I think it's just with this population, it's hard and it takes time. And you can have days where you're doing great for like 3 days and they're doing their work or they're
Yeah.
not having an explosive behavior. And then they come from mom's house or dad's house
Yep.
and something happened, right? And so now they're coming into class. They already cursed you out before they walked in the door. As they're walking in, they're tearing everything down. And it's kind of like, oh, well, there went everything.
Hmm.
So I think it's the discouraging feeling of when the behaviors come up again.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think it's important for staff to understand that, like, even with this intensive behavioral program and the amount of consistent compassion that we give these students, they will still have behaviors
Yes.
and they will still have bad days and they still may
Yes.
curse you out. Um, but in those moments, it's important for them to see Miss Christina is still standing here.
Hmm.
Miss Christina didn't walk away. Miss Christina is still going to go to lunch with me. And so I think I don't feel like people don't understand, but I feel like it's so discouraging working with this population at times because you can easily feel like all the work you have put in is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I know you say there's 10 people in your program, right? There's 10, something like that. 10.
I mean, that's what it can go to. Yeah. So on
And
average, I would say more like five to ish students.
and then at the campus that you're on, you probably got a good 10. How big is the campus you're on? How many students are on that campus?
I don't know that answer, but I would say it's a decent sized campus.
It's
Maybe three
K
to
through
four
6.
classes per grade. It's K through, or yeah.
Oh,
They
it's
have two
big.
K two. Is
It's
it? Yeah, it's a
big.
comprehensive campus. So
So
maybe three teachers per grade level.
yeah, and so you figure even on that campus, there's a good 20 kids with behaviors.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, even on that campus, there's like a good amount of behaviors on that. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
You
Yeah.
said something about basic needs, and
Hmm.
I think we learned it this year more than ever. You talk about the muffin and you talk about,
The
whatever
water.
it is, the orange juice, the water, and we see that there is so much, and like you said, it's hard to tell, like, is it about the muffin, is it about the water, is it about you providing the muffin and the water?
It's
And
all of that.
it's all of that.
Hmm.
We called ourselves the waitresses sometimes, um, because that's at times what it felt like. It was like, but I think in learning about this population, there is such an anxiety component to basic needs.
Hmm.
And that tends to offset, not every day, it's not always about the orange juice, but some days the orange juice changes the trajectory of the day.
Yeah.
And I wish that little, like, when we go to our whole class graduated this year, and they will be transitioning back to comprehensive classrooms. And that is something that I have highlighted in all of the IEPs, is that if nothing else, and I'm not saying have, because it can get to the point where you feel like a vending machine, and you don't want that. You have to put boundaries and limits on it.
That's right.
But it's a game changer. Those basic, we have toothbrushes in our classroom.
Perfect.
We have shoes, we have clothes, we had a student,
Baby wipes.
Yeah, baby wipes,
hand sanitizer, all of that.
And we had this little pair of shoes on one of our students, and he had shoes. The kid had shoes, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But his shoes came untied every day, and he didn't know how to tie them, and it was a point of contention. And we had a pair of, I don't even know, like Dollar Tree slip-on shoes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we put him on him one day. I'm thinking, there is no way he is going to come back in these shoes. He's going to put his Vans back on, and that kid wear those shoes every single day for the rest of the school year.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a question for you. Like, so teachers will say, you send them to the admin, and they come back with a muffin and an orange juice.
Yeah.
That's what they say, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to that?
It's funny because I teach the CPI for our district. And so part of that, we teach the verbal de-escalation and all of that goes with that. And I think in some capacity, I agree with the teachers, because we have to do a better job of incorporating admin at a different point of the cycle. If every single time the orange juice and the muffin comes after a behavior, the true behaviorist in me is like, that's not a good thing, right? And that will maintain this behavior, even if it's I wasn't fed breakfast, even if my mom didn't show up last night, even if whatever, even if all of those things happen and the kid is really in a deficit of a muffin and orange juice. Admin, and we have to do a better job of incorporating admin, not just in crisis.
Yeah.
Because I would be pissed too if somebody came back to my classroom after turning a desk upside, and they came back with,
in 2 minutes, and they came back with a muffin and a juice, right? Yeah, yep. I would be pissed off as well.
Yeah,
I would be pissed as well. I'll go back to the admin, like informing admin. I feel like admin should already know to go ahead and build those relationships with kids. Like admin shouldn't be informed. They should know. Like, you know what? There's 25 kids on this campus that I really need to pay attention to. Like really close. There's 25 kids, and if I just checked in with these 25 kids, then these classrooms, these teachers, the students in the classroom, everybody will be learning. I just need to check in with these kids. That's all I need to do. I feel like admin needs to do that. And if the admin does that, then the school's going to run smoothly. And things aren't going to be perfect. Kids are still going to flip desks or curse somebody out. But if admin goes around and takes their time to, make those connections, that's going to be a big plus. Because when the teacher calls, admin shows up and admin's like, all right. And then again, admin has to be able to have some sort of procedures, not like here's a juice and here's some cookies and go back to classes. No, like, what happened? What harm did you create? How do you repair that harm? There are consequences for your actions. What's a good consequence for what you did? There's something, you just can't flip desks, or you can't just harm. You can't just say the F word to your teacher. What are we going to do about that? And go through that whole process. That's the way to do it, I feel. And
yeah, I tell admin all the time, if you're only involved in crisis behavior, you become one of two things. You either become a punisher or you become a reinforcer. Mm-hmm. But neither one changes that behavior for the better.
Mm-hmm. I just made a
And
post. It was called "I'm Not Your Punisher." I'm not your
yeah,
punisher. I'm not your punisher. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to work through these problems with you, build a relationship, and work through these problems with you. I'm not here to punish you. I'm not your punisher.
That's
Christina, you're
funny.
gonna say something?
yeah, I think to add to that, like I said, it's I would I guess it would be naive of me to believe that everybody is trauma informed, um, and is aware of like the basic needs. But I think it's important to kind of address in the opposite way, as if nobody may understand that. Um, and it's a little difficult in my position because I'm not admin, I'm not a teacher, I'm not a
Yeah.
BCBA. I'm kind of, I'm the bottom of the barrel, basically.
Hmm.
So there are things that I'm not aware of, or, I don't know how it works, and that's okay. But I think what I have seen is even those above me in higher levels aren't necessarily trauma informed, but as somebody who has took the responsibility on myself to learn all I can, it's also my responsibility to help them understand and help them learn. And I think that's where my biggest point of view is like just because, well, first of all, be humble and understand your role, but don't let your position determine how much you can learn and know.
Yeah.
Because I can easily say, like, oh, I'm just the behavioral aid. Like, it's not your admin, right? You should know. But there are situations where I I may have taken the lead on working with a student and having to inform admin like, hey, we're
She
not going to do
paused.
I
this.
think she froze.
Oh,
Christina froze.
am I back?
There we go. There you go. You're
Okay.
back. You're back.
So in my position, being at a lower level position, there were times where I had to step in and kind of take the lead with a student, and admin is present. and and just kind of informing admin like, hey, we're going to try it this way instead of this way, and this is why, or kind of jumping in when I had to, and then later on talking with admin saying, this is why I did what I did, and this is what I noticed beforehand. And so
Mm,
even though I'm in an aid position, I took on the responsibility of myself to learn about these students. So it is also my responsibility to teach those who may not fully understand. So
yeah.
that way it's like the ripple effect. So I teach it to somebody else and they understand it. They teach it to somebody else and they understand it. And then that's where our community kind of comes in together to create that better, educational community
Yeah.
for the student.
I just don't want to give admin a break. And I'm admin. I'm admin, and I want to give admin a break. I feel like admin should know they've heard of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They've heard of that. They know that you take care of the physiological need, then safety, then love, then they know all. They've been in the same classes, and so I feel like they forget. People
Yeah.
forget. They forget that, but they won't forget if they didn't get a cup of coffee themselves, and then they go into work and they're upset because they didn't get their cup of coffee and something that kind of simple thing like get your whatever and your routines off. You forgot to get your Starbucks, whatever, and now your whole day is a little off. You missed the gym that morning, and you always go to the gym, and now your whole day is a little off. That's kind of like the kids, things happen, and now their whole day is a little off. Just like us, we're like mirrors of these guys. If I don't go to the gym in the morning, and I like kind of like I'm already in a bad headspace, I'm already like, dang, I should have went to the gym. And then let's say I went to reach for my coffee and there was no more coffee. I'm like, "Ugh, there's no more coffee. I gotta be working 5 minutes. I gotta be working 5 minutes. Drive to work already. I'm already like rushed and upset and you know. And if I walked into the school and somebody said, "Here you go, Mr. Vergara. Here's a cup of coffee, and we're gonna give you 30 minutes to work out." I'm like,
Yeah.
thank you so much. My day is gonna go so good now because I wanted. That's what I need for me to be successful.
Yeah.
And I feel like people forget that we all have needs. Everybody has needs, and we just need to meet those needs.
I think people forget that these students are people.
Yeah.
And they forget that, yes, you're working with a student, but you're working with a person.
Hmm.
And working within this program, I think that's kind of like what I've learned the most this program has taught me more about me and how I handle things more than what the student can do.
Yeah.
And I think that was like a big thing for me this year is I treated them like a person. I talked to them like this. I didn't take on an authoritative role in any way, but hey, how's it going? I don't want to
Christina,
talk to you. That's cool. Give, I'll give you 10 minutes and check in a bit. Fine.
you sound very selfless. You sound very giving. You
Mhm.
sound very loving and caring. You sound like you put other people's needs before you put your own needs. Just by my this conversation with you, the last 40 some odd minutes with you, I could already tell that that's the type of person that you are. And because of that reason, I bet you have great relationships with these kids. I bet you that you connect with these kids on a whole different level because you're putting their needs before you put your own needs. And I think that in general, if people just did that, right? Like if admin put their needs before put their teachers' needs before themselves, put the students' needs before themselves.
I
You know,
think
think
it's
that,
yeah, I pride myself on the relationships that I have built within the classroom. But if that was a learning curve, and I think I put their needs before yours to an extent because in this job it will drain you and you
yeah,
will come home and then you can give everything to these kids and that this is still a learning curve that I'm going through now is I can give everything to those kids and then I come home and it's not the same.
yeah,
And I was called out on it recently and told, you need to communicate like you tell your kids to communicate. And it kind of hit me and I said, you're right.
yeah,
And I think that's important is to realize how much you can give before you're overworking yourself. Because once you give too much to these kids, they're gonna pull it all. And then what are you gonna give? Then tomorrow when you get punched in the face, what are you gonna give? You have to know your boundaries in a program like this, and you have to know when to ask for help and when you need a break. And I think it's also important to express to these students like you are making me really upset right now,
yep,
or I'm not happy.
that's
And
right.
but you're doing two things. One, you're showing the student to I can communicate with you and be very, very upset, but I don't have to throw a chair at you. But I feel you also tell yourself too, I can say those things. I can say I'm upset and I can
Mhm.
say I'm not okay with it and I need a break.
Absolutely, I feel like boundaries are important. You could be kind and loving and caring, but you could also draw that hard line. Like you need a hard line.
Mhm.
And
So,
I think without that hard line, and I think we've seen it within the program, it'll show. I mean,
mhm,
the kids will know, the other staff will know, um, everything will just kind of shift. And it's
yeah,
important to understand that you can be selfless, but you can also be selfish in a certain manner.
yeah, I'm with that. I feel like I'm selfless, but I hold a hard line. So like, yeah, I'm giving and caring, but the minute you cross me, I'm like, whoa, whoa, let's stop right there. We're not going any
Yeah.
further. That's it.
Um,
Yeah.
and that was very important. It was this year, we deal with some really big behaviors, and to the point where some people may not really understand the type of behaviors that we're dealing with. Um, and I feel like every student knew how I would respond, whether they threw a chair at me or whether they rolled their eyes at me.
Mhm.
It's in those moments, it's so, so, so important to remain consistent, to remain calm, because they're going to feed off of that energy. And
Right.
I just saw this, quote, and it was talking about basically they're going to poke the bear for people with
Mhm.
poor attachment issues. They're going to poke the bear until they get the response they want. And then it turns into like, see, I told you. So
Right.
within those huge behaviors, it was still important for me to talk exactly like I am with them during those moments.
Yeah.
And it not only calmed them down in those moments, but it showed I can't poke this bear and she's not going to leave me.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end of the podcast right here, and I want to ask you guys before you guys leave right here. What are some tips? And I'm gonna ask Christina first and Victoria. What are some tips you could give to the classroom teacher who has students with big behaviors like you're explaining? What are some one or two tips that you could give to the classroom teacher dealing with students like the one we're describing today?
Remember that they're a person, and remember that they're going through some hard moments, and maybe moments or hard times that we may never experience in our lives. Um, it's important to be understanding and flexible. And I think another thought would be do it with all your heart. Because if your heart isn't all there, it's a hard place to work.
Yeah.
Specifically working with students with behaviors. And I think once you are in it with your heart, the kids are going to pick up on that, and it just will naturally start flowing all together.
Thank you. How about you, Victoria?
I'll give you some tangible stuff that I've learned over the years in this program. I think meet basic needs, understand that that is a core component of a lot of these students, and that those primary needs often serve to reset a lot of these students, reduce public shaming in the classroom, creating systems that further divide or acknowledge behavior in a public format only yield the same behaviors that you were trying to reduce.
Yeah.
Have kids participate in their repair and their rapport with teachers. Have them be part of the process. Like you said, I think you do that as an admin. You will be amazed at what kids come up with in the sense of what they feel is an appropriate response or repair for a situation they have damaged.
Yeah.
And I think just really don't worry about all of the systems that you think need to be put in place for these kids. Less is more. Create the relationship first, and then you can slowly embed some of those things. But I think that you will never out reinforce a lack of a relationship. And then I think that overall we have learned that this population requires a level of novelty in curriculum and in teaching. They're kinesthetic learners. They learn through movement. Sometimes just the visual aspect of a worksheet or an assignment is enough to derail the class. And so it's not to say that that isn't something they all need to work on, and that there is a goal to incorporate paper pencil type learning, but understand that if you don't embed it with novelty and movement, it's going to be a rough day.
Yeah. Well, Christina, Victoria, thank you so much for being on the
Thank
podcast.
you.
I greatly appreciate your time and for you sharing all of your wisdom here on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.